Hello, welcome back. I'm Travis IQ, and today we're day 2 of Cisco Live. Yesterday was amazing. If you weren't part of it, please check it out for day 2. They have some free tiers and things like that at Cisco. But anyway, I wanted to talk about my experience at Cisco Live and why I liked it, right? And so the first thing I wanted to say is I took my own advice and didn't attend too many of the conference sessions, which was a good thing for me, and I'm going to talk about that here in a second. I will also say that the participation in social media, another piece of advice that I had given out that I decided to take myself, was actually really useful. So I found that one, Cisco Live was tweeting out and responding to a lot of the feedback that they got for their content. And so they were shouting out to people and engaging in the conversation, which I thought was awesome. I've seen a lot of really great discussions around generating a social media footprint and being a solid participant in your own social media environment. And Cisco is apparently making an effort to do that. And so I applaud that first and foremost, right? Also, I got some feedback from some other individuals too. So Library Day was out there tweeting in his downtime. It was actually really solid. So kudos to people participating in the community, right? That's what we need, especially as a bunch of introverted networking and data analytics and cybersecurity and automation folk, right? So that was really good from a participation standpoint. Let's talk about a couple of the sessions, though. Some things that I liked about the sessions and what I got out of them. So first, I said I personally was going to attend the session that regarded security and security analytics and metrics. And I was really interested with how they were going to integrate metrics moving forward and what they had been doing. First and foremost, one of the discussions that I got that I hadn't really thought about was how do you look for security outliers. Remember I said yesterday I was going to, I was interested in their outlier mechanisms. And so the first thing that the presenter pointed out was that there's actually 2 mechanisms at least in machine learning, to identify outliers, right? And so one is against a source of truth, right? So basically saying, I have Travis's face and I'm looking for his face. I have a hash of a malicious file and I am looking for that file hash, right? Or I have a pattern behavior and I'm looking for that specific behavior, right? The other one is machine learning without a source of truth. What does that mean? That means that I am looking for cats, but I don't give you a cat, right? I'm looking for you to identify cats in a list of dogs, but I don't give you cats and dogs, right? I tell you what cats' behavioral patterns are. I tell you that cats are smaller than dogs. Cats are more furry and tend to hang out in less large groups, right? And then you identify what you think are the cats and what you think are the dogs, and then report it to me, for example, right? And so this also applies to identifying security outliers. So, we have higher instances of data transfer. We have larger read and write calls. We have different file allocations and different file spaces. Okay, and then you say, okay, based upon this criteria, give me what you think are the outliers, which I thought was pretty interesting. They said, both are valid. One is easier to train, but more easily bypassed, right? And one is tougher to train, but hopefully will identify a few more malicious instances. And so that was useful. The other one was that the data isn't always an identifier of malicious intent. It may be an identifier of traffic patterns, right? So you might be using this information to identify traffic for optimization for other reasons. And so if you get, let's say if StealthWatch, for example, were to flag a top talking endpoint, one of the questions the presenter posed was, that they get a lot is, well, what is the instance of false positive? And he said, we have to explain to people, and I thought this was really interesting as well, that it's not a false positive, it's not a positive negative case, right? This isn't really a case of positive or negative. What does that mean? How do you explain the fact that it's not a positive or negative case? And what you're actually saying is, right, that this data this large transfer of data is an indicator or is something that should be flagged for you no matter what, or is going to be flagged no matter what, let's say that. And it's not necessarily an indicator of malicious behavior. It's not necessarily an indicator that the end user did something wrong or did something that they shouldn't do. It's just an indicator to you that there are hosts that are going to be utilizing large swaths of data and or connectivity, right, bandwidth, to do certain things. And so it's not a case of positive or negative, false positive or false negative. It's a case of flagging info that you want to see. And the more often we can do that, the more effectively we can flag information that you need to see. High throughput, bandwidth utilization, variable calls, GitHub repo calls, right? These types of things. Then the more insight you'll have into your network, which I thought was really, really interesting. So we're through two of my topics, social media and analytics, which I thought were great. The next one is, and this is me most importantly taking my own advice, was what I came across when I was just flipping through sessions. So there was a bunch of sessions going on simultaneously. I had some things that I wanted to see, and I also had an idea in my mind that I didn't want to inundate myself with information and get overwhelmed. I, in fact, did this, right? I took a break in the middle of Cisco Live and fed the dog and did other things, right? And this makes a lot of sense. If you're not going to be engaged, then why are you sitting in front of a screen watching me? Anyway, when I was flipping through some content, I came across a really interesting discussion that I liked as well, and I thought I'd share with you my experience. So I came across a discussion of endpoint detection and response, EDR, and the presenter was talking about Cisco AnyConnect. And so traditionally, we think of Cisco AnyConnect as a VPN client. You have to download Cisco AnyConnect and connect to a local VPN endpoint or a VPN endpoint that's closest to you in the world if you work for a big multinational corporation, and connect to Dallas or San Francisco or Seattle. And that VPN endpoint facilitates an end-to-end encrypted session, a tunnel through to the corporate backbone. And dependent upon how the tunnel is designed and what security protocols you're using, it defines how this thing works. So we could talk more about VPN endpoints and clients. And that's what we think of. We think of it as a client that facilitates this VPN connection. We don't think of it necessarily as a data collection point. And so we should, and especially in the environment of remote work that we are moving towards, where everyone is working from home some percentage of the time, or anyone who has the opportunity is going to work from home a certain percentage of the time, then these VPN clients become really important components of our network architecture that are being utilized by 90% of the corporate environment at some point. And so they are also facilitating connections. They are the client point for data transfer. So they have information, and specifically the setup of that VPN tunnel is going to have some clear text info as well. So you have the amount of data being transferred, you have the frequency of utilization, you have the clear text information with the setup of the IPsec tunnel, for example, the VPN tunnel. So there's a lot of information there. And the presenter pointed out, from a security standpoint, and the presenter pointed out that it actually was being collected, but it was treated as tier 2 data. Basically, it wasn't treated as aggregate data for analytics. It was treated as data that could be used to identify something that occurred, but it wasn't pulled into the StealthWatch infrastructure to, let's say, act on in terms of dynamic filtration of traffic or dynamic firewall updates and things like this. And they said what they had done in the last 12 to 24 months was take that data, format it, and include it as tier 1 data in their threat detection infrastructure. So that now all of this endpoint data that you are aggregating is actually part of that threat detection profile and can be actionable on an integrated basis. You're like, well, I was collecting the data, but it wasn't integrated as tier 1 data. And I just thought it was a really great discussion. And I came across that discussion unbeknownst to me. This is one of the major benefits of these types of conferences is you can go and YouTube content about IPsec, but you can't get a discussion from a expert in that field and that technology discussing why they did something and how it's beneficial to you and how to implement it. And I thought it was phenomenal. We are right up against the time. I'm going to do 10 minutes every weekday on different content these last couple of days of Cisco Live because Cisco is live, but that's all I have. We'll see you tomorrow.